What if the greatest structures ever imagined were not built by human hands, but designed in the minds of gods? Picture the pyramids of Egypt, not as tombs of stone, but as cosmic machines engineered by divine intellect. Envision the heavenly palaces of Olympus, constructed from cloud and lightning, where every column and corridor whispered of power beyond mortal comprehension. These were the creations of mythic architects, the original civil engineers of the divine, whose blueprints were woven from legend, whose tools were the elements themselves, and whose constructions shaped not only the landscape of belief, but the very structure of reality as ancient cultures understood it. Across civilizations and centuries, our ancestors looked at the world around them and saw more than rock and river. They saw intention. They saw design. They saw the hand of something greater at work, something that built with purpose and meaning. This video is an invitation to step into that imaginative space, to explore how cultures from Mesopotamia to Mesoamerica envisioned their gods not merely as creators of life, but as master builders of order, harmony, and sacred space. We are about to journey through stories where temples touch the stars, where cities mirror the cosmos, and where every arch, every pillar, every carefully placed stone tells a story of divine authority and human aspiration. You will discover how these mythic constructions reveal profound truths about how people understood their place in the universe, how they grappled with chaos by imagining structures of perfect order, how they expressed reverence through geometry and alignment, and how they sought to bridge the gap between earth and heaven through architecture that transcended mere function. This is not just a tour of ancient sites or a list of legends. It is a deep dive into the psychology of belief, the artistry of myth, and the timeless human urge to build meaning into the world around us. By the end of this exploration, you will see mythology not as mere story, but as a kind of spiritual engineering, one that continues to echo in our cathedrals, our monuments, and even our modern dreams of what is possible. So let's begin this journey together, back to a time when the world was still being imagined and the architects were gods. Before we can understand the magnificent structures themselves, we must first meet the masterminds behind them, the original architects whose blueprints were drawn not on parchment, but in the very fabric of myth. Across ancient cultures, a fascinating pattern emerges, the figure of the divine builder. This is not merely a god of creation in a general sense, but a specific deity whose domain is the deliberate, intelligent design of the cosmos and everything in it. They are the ultimate civil engineers, blending raw creative power with a profound sense of order, function, and symbolic meaning. Consider Ptah, one of the most ancient and enigmatic gods of Egypt. While other deities might create through physical action, Ptah conceived the entire universe through the sheer force of his heart and tongue, through thought and commanding speech. He envisioned the world and then spoke its physical laws, its landscapes, and its inhabitants into perfect existence. He is the divine architect in the purest sense, the master planner whose intellectual design precedes and informs all material reality. His power was not just about making things, but about imposing a coherent, beautiful, and functional order upon the formless void. Then, journey to the vibrant tapestry of Hindu tradition, and you will encounter Vishvakarma. He is the master craftsman of the gods, the divine engineer tasked with building their celestial cities, their magnificent flying chariots, and their powerful weapons. The texts describe him as the architect of the entire universe, the one who shaped the world with skill and precision. He represents the idea that creation is not a chaotic event but a skilled profession, requiring immense knowledge, artistry, and technical expertise. He is the patron of all human artisans, the divine source from which all earthly architecture and craftsmanship flows. These figures, and others like them across the globe, from the Mesopotamian god E to the Norse god Odin who arranged the cosmos, share a crucial common thread. They were more than just powerful beings, they were specialists. Their role was to translate abstract divine will into tangible, structured form. They designed palaces that embodied the absolute power of a king of the gods, temples that served as perfect conduits for spiritual energy, and even the very blueprint of reality itself, with its heavens, earth, and underworld. Their work was meant to be a permanent expression of harmony, power, and sacred significance, a stable structure in a world that often felt uncertain and chaotic. By starting with these mythic architects, we gain a critical insight into the ancient mind. It reveals a worldview where the universe itself is a grand architectural project, built with intention and according to a perfect plan. This perspective transforms how we see their own earthly constructions. When humans built a pyramid, a ziggurat, or a temple, they weren't just stacking stones, they were participating in a divine tradition, attempting to emulate the sacred work of these original master builders on a scale they could manage. Understanding this foundational concept of the divine architect allows us to see the profound connection ancient societies made between the sacred and the structural, where every pillar raised to the sky was an echo of a god's first design. So if these divine architects were the master planners, then the universe itself was their first and greatest construction project. Across countless cultures, the very act of creation is described not as a biological event, but as an architectural one, a meticulous process of design, measurement, and assembly. The cosmos in these ancient narratives is envisioned as a colossal, intricate building, complete with foundations, pillars, and a ceiling. This architectural metaphor provided a powerful framework for understanding how a stable, ordered world could emerge from the swirling chaos of nothingness. Perhaps no story captures this violent, transformative construction more vividly than the Babylonian Enuma Elish. In this epic, the world begins not with light, but with a primal battle between the god Marduk and the chaotic sea monster Tiamat. After a tremendous struggle, Marduk defeats her, but his work is only half done. He then performs a breathtaking act of divine engineering. He splits her massive body in two. With one half, he constructs the vault of the heavens. With the other, he solidifies the foundations of the earth. Her weeping eyes become the sources of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, and her tail is bent up to form the Milky Way. This isn't just a victory, it's a cosmic repurposing. Marduk doesn't destroy chaos, he deconstructs it and uses its very essence as the raw building material for a new, structured universe. He is both a warrior and a foreman, turning the body of disorder into the pillars of order. A similar, though more precarious, construction project unfolds in the cold mists of Norse mythology. Here, the gods are not all powerful creators but struggling settlers, desperately trying to build a fortress strong enough to protect them from the giants. Their home, Asgard, needs an impregnable wall, and a mysterious giant builder arrives with an offer. He will complete the wall in a single season in exchange for the goddess Freyja, the sun, and the moon. The gods, thinking the task impossible, agree, but the builder, aided by his incredibly powerful stallion, makes astonishing progress. With the deadline looming and the wall nearly finished, the gods panic, realizing they are about to lose the very sources of light and life. They must resort to trickery to stop him, highlighting the fragile and often morally ambiguous nature of imposing order. The Wall of Asgard stands not as a testament to effortless divine power, but as a hard-won achievement, a symbol of the constant, fragile negotiation between order and the chaotic forces that constantly threaten to tear it down. These stories, and countless others like them, reveal a profound and universal human impulse. Faced with a vast, unpredictable, and often frightening world, our ancestors used the most relatable process they knew, building, to explain how it all came to be. They looked at the stable ground beneath their feet and imagined it had foundations. They looked at the sky arching overhead and described it as a dome or a ceiling. They saw mountains and giant trees and envisioned them as pillars holding everything up. This wasn't primitive science, it was profound philosophy. By framing creation in architectural terms, they were asserting that the universe was not accidental. It was designed, it had a plan, it was built with intention, and therefore it had a purpose. This perspective transformed the unknown from a terrifying void into a structured home, a place where humanity could find its own purpose and meaning, safe within the walls built by gods. But if the universe itself was the first great construction project, then sacred geometry was the divine language used to draft its blueprints. The mythic architects we just met didn't just build with brute force. They designed with an intricate, mathematical precision that was believed to echo the very harmony of the cosmos. This wasn't just engineering, it was a form of spiritual communication, a way to weave the laws of the heavens into the very fabric of their earthly creations. They operated on the profound belief that certain shapes, ratios, and alignments held inherent power, that by incorporating these sacred principles, a structure could become more than a building. It could become a resonant vessel for divine energy, a focal point where the human and the heavenly could meet. Nowhere is this principle more stunningly evident than in the silent, enduring majesty of the Great Pyramid of Giza. Its sheer scale is awe-inspiring, but its true genius lies in the details that are invisible to the naked eye. The sides of the pyramid are aligned with the four cardinal directions with an accuracy that rivals modern surveying techniques. Its shafts and corridors are precisely oriented towards specific celestial bodies. One shaft points directly to the belt of the constellation Orion, which the Egyptians associated with Osiris, the god of rebirth and the afterlife. This wasn't a coincidence, it was a deliberate, calculated design choice. The pyramid was conceived as a machine for resurrection, a colossal device engineered to capture celestial energy and guide the soul of the pharaoh on its journey to the stars. It was architecture as an astronomical instrument, built to synchronize the rhythms of the earth with the eternal cycles of the sky. This fusion of math and mysticism finds another profound expression in the ancient Hindu science of Vastu Shastra. This is a comprehensive architectural doctrine, a set of texts that dictate every single aspect of building a temple or even a home. Vastu Shastra governs the precise proportions of every room, the ideal placement of doors and windows, and the exact materials to be used. The goal is to create a structure that exists in perfect harmony with the unseen forces of the universe, the flow of energy, the elements, and the cosmos itself. A temple designed according to these principles is not just a place to worship a god, it is a physical model of the cosmic order. The central shrine represents Mount Meru, the axis of the world, and the entire layout is a mandala, a sacred geometric pattern meant to facilitate spiritual journey and meditation. Every angle and every measurement is a deliberate act of inviting balance and divine presence into the physical space. We see this same intentional design echoed across the ancient world. The Parthenon in Greece is renowned for its use of the golden ratio, a mathematical proportion of roughly 1 to 1.618, which was considered the formula for perfect beauty and balance. Its columns are not perfectly straight, they curve slightly to correct optical illusions and create a sense of effortless harmony to the human eye. Even Stonehenge, with its massive trilithons, functions as a sophisticated calendar. The arrangement of its stones captures the solstice sunrises and sunsets, marking the turning points of the year with dramatic light and shadow ceremonies. These structures were never intended to be merely functional shelters or simple places of gathering. They were conceived as active participants in a spiritual dialogue. They were batteries for cosmic power, bridges to other realms, and stone prayers offered up to the sky. The architects who designed them, whether divine or divinely inspired, understood that true power comes from alignment not just of stone upon stone, but of human aspiration with the mathematical music of the universe. Yet these sacred geometries and precise alignments were only one part of a much deeper story. A mythic structure was never just a feat of engineering. It was a dense, multi-layered text written in the language of symbolism. Every single element, from the grandest pillar to the smallest decorative detail, was imbued with profound meaning. The architects of the divine were not just builders, they were storytellers using stone, layout, and material to encode entire cosmologies, moral lessons, and systems of power into their work. To step into one of these spaces was to read a story written in 3 dimensions, a narrative designed to be experienced with the entire body and soul. Consider the mighty ziggurats of ancient Mesopotamia, those massive stepped pyramids that dominated the flat river plains. Their form was not arbitrary. Each level, each ascending terrace was a deliberate symbol. They were conceived as a stairway or a ladder to the heavens, a physical and symbolic bridge between the world of humans and the realm of the gods. The act of a priest climbing those steps during a ritual was a reenactment of this cosmic journey, a powerful piece of theological theater made manifest in brick and bitumen. The entire structure served as a constant, visible reminder that the divine was not entirely remote. It could be approached, albeit through great effort and sacred ceremony. This desire to embody connection is equally visible in the architectural genius of ancient Greece. Look at a temple like the Parthenon, and you will see rows of majestic columns. But to the Greek mind, these were not mere load-bearing pillars. They were the caryatids and telamons, sculpted figures of men and women that seemed to hold the weight of the roof upon their shoulders. These were not just decorative flourishes, they were a powerful statement about the relationship between humanity and the divine. They symbolized the ideal human form, perfected and strong, participating directly in the sacred work of supporting the gods' home on earth. The architecture itself proclaimed that humanity had a vital, active role in maintaining the cosmic order, literally bearing the burden of the heavens with grace and strength. The symbolism extended far beyond shape and form into the very materials chosen. Gold, for instance, was not selected for its mere monetary value or even its beauty. Across cultures, from the ceilings of Egyptian tombs to the statues in Hindu temples, gold was used because it was seen as the flesh of the gods, a material that was incorruptible, eternal, and radiant. It symbolized immortality and divine light. Similarly, the number 7 held extraordinary power, representing perfection and completeness. This is why we find 7 tiers on many ziggurats, 7 circuits to the labyrinth of Knossos, and 7 heavens described in numerous religious texts. The number itself was a building block of cosmic order. Even the orientation of a building was a deliberate symbolic act. Temples were almost universally aligned with the cardinal directions or with significant astronomical events. To face the rising sun was to align with creation, rebirth, and the source of life itself. This careful placement integrated the structure into the daily and yearly cycles of the cosmos, making the building a functioning part of a living, breathing universe. A worshipper entering such a space was not leaving the world behind. They were stepping into a microcosm, a perfectly ordered center point from which the entire divine plan could be understood. The architecture itself was a guide, leading the visitor on a physical and spiritual journey from the profane outer world toward the sacred, symbolically charged heart of the inner sanctum. In this way, these mythic structures did not just house belief, they taught it, reinforced it, and made it an immersive, unforgettable experience. Now, let's bring these ideas down to earth, or rather, to the sands of Egypt, to see how this symbolic and spiritual engineering was realized in one of humanity's most iconic structures, the pyramids. These are not just colossal piles of stone, they are perhaps the ultimate expression of mythic architecture, where every angle, every corridor, and every ton of limestone was charged with a single, profound purpose: to transform a mortal king into an immortal star. The pyramids were far more than royal tombs. They were the most sophisticated spiritual technology of the ancient world, designed as cosmic launch pads for the soul. Central to this entire endeavor was the god Thoth, the divine patron of wisdom, writing, and most importantly, measurement. He was the celestial architect, the great reckoner of time and space. Egyptian mythology credits Thoth with devising the principles of mathematics, astronomy, and geometry. He was the master planner who provided the sacred blueprints, the divine standard of measurement that ensured a building was not just structurally sound but cosmically aligned. When the pharaoh's architects laid out the foundation of a pyramid with such breathtaking precision, they were not merely demonstrating human skill. They were executing a plan believed to be of divine origin, channeling the wisdom of Thoth to create a structure that could interface with the heavens themselves. This intention is etched into the very alignment of the Great Pyramid of Giza. Its four sides are oriented to the four cardinal directions with an error of less than 1/15 of a degree, a feat that seems almost impossible for its time. But the precision goes deeper, aiming beyond the horizon and into the cosmos. The southern shafts emanating from the king's chamber were precisely targeted to point toward the belt of the constellation Orion, which the Egyptians knew as Sa, the celestial representation of Osiris, the god of the afterlife and rebirth. Another shaft aligned with the star Sirius, associated with Isis, the mother goddess. This was no coincidence. The pyramid was designed as a physical conduit, a channel to funnel the soul of the deceased pharaoh directly into the eternal, cyclical dance of the stars. He would not just go to the afterlife, he would join the eternal, unchanging cosmos, becoming one of the imperishable stars that circled the pole. The entire structure functioned like a machine. The narrow ascending passages, the grand gallery, the burial chamber itself with its massive granite sarcophagus, each element was a component in this intricate device. The rituals performed within, the spells from the pyramid texts inscribed on the walls, and the carefully placed grave goods were all part of the activation sequence. The pyramid was a physical instrument designed to operate on a spiritual plane, protecting the pharaoh's journey, overcoming chaotic forces, and ensuring his successful transformation and ascension. It was a permanent, indestructible guarantee of eternal life, built to outlast the ages. And yet, for all this divine inspiration, we must also marvel at the staggering human achievement. Tens of thousands of workers, immense quarries, complex ramp systems, and ingenious logistics. The construction was a masterpiece of practical civil engineering. The ancient Egyptians did not have superhuman powers. They had extraordinary organization, skill, and dedication. The myth does not erase this human effort, it elevates it. The workers who hauled those multi-ton blocks were not slaves to a tyrant. They were participants in a sacred national project, a religious duty that ensured the continuity of the cosmos and the favor of the gods. The divine plan of Thoth was made manifest through the sweat, intelligence, and faith of an entire civilization. This beautiful duality is the true legacy of the pyramids. They stand at the perfect intersection of the tangible and the imaginary. We can touch the stone, measure the angles, and study the archaeology, but to fully understand them, we must also embrace the myth. They are a powerful reminder that the most enduring structures humanity has ever created are those that were built not just for the body, but for the soul. Monuments where impeccable engineering serves a profound spiritual vision, creating a bridge between the dust of the earth and the glittering expanse of the night sky. While the pyramids of Egypt reached for the stars to guide a soul skyward, the tradition of Hindu temple architecture takes a different, yet equally profound, approach. It seeks to bring the entire cosmos down to earth, constructing a complete model of the universe in stone. To step into a traditional Hindu temple is not merely to enter a building. It is to embark on a guided journey through the very structure of reality itself, a pilgrimage from the outer realms of illusion and distraction toward the inner core of ultimate truth and consciousness. This is architecture as a spiritual map, meticulously drafted by divine intelligence and executed with devotional precision. The mastermind behind this cosmic blueprint is the god Vishvakarma, the divine architect and craftsman of the gods. He is the ultimate engineer, the personification of creative power and flawless skill. Hindu texts credit him with building the celestial cities of the deities, their magnificent palaces, and their powerful flying vehicles. But his most enduring legacy is the architectural knowledge he bestowed upon humanity, codified in ancient texts known as the Shilpa Shastras. These are not simple building manuals, they are exhaustive spiritual and technical encyclopedias. They dictate everything with meticulous detail, the exact proportions of every pillar and doorway, the specific types of stone and wood to be used, the rituals for consecrating the land, and even the ideal astrological timing for laying the foundation stone. Every single aspect of construction is governed by a rule, not to limit creativity, but to ensure that the final structure vibrates in perfect harmony with the cosmic order. The human architect, or esthapati, is therefore not an independent artist but a vessel, a skilled technician channeling the divine principles of Vishvakarma into physical form. The central organizing principle of this divine design is the concept of the Vastu Purusha mandala. This is a sacred geometric diagram, a square grid that represents the cosmic being, the Purusha, from whose body the universe was formed. This grid is the metaphysical foundation upon which the entire temple is laid out. It symbolizes the manifest world with its order and its boundaries. At the very center of this grid lies the Garbhagriha, the womb chamber. This small, dark, and unadorned inner sanctum is the heart of the entire temple complex. It does not represent a place on earth, but the axis of the universe itself. It is the symbolic equivalent of Mount Meru, the holy mountain that, in Hindu cosmology, stands at the very center of all creation, connecting the earthly realm with the higher planes of existence. The enshrined deity within the Garbhagriha is not just an idol, it is the focal point of cosmic energy, the unmoving center around which the entire cycle of time and space revolves. Radiating outward from this still center, the temple's architecture meticulously maps the cosmos. The multiple concentric walls and enclosures that surround the Garbhagriha represent the mountain ranges that were believed to encircle Mount Meru at the edge of the world. The towering gateway, or gopuram, often lavishly sculpted with hundreds of figures from mythology, marks the transition from the profane outer world into the sacred symbolic universe. The journey of a worshipper is a deliberate physical metaphor for the path to enlightenment. One begins in the noisy, crowded outer courtyards, symbolizing the distractions of the material world. As one moves inward, passing through successive gateways and spaces, the environment becomes progressively quieter, more focused, and more intimate. The outermost areas are filled with sensory experiences, the smell of incense, the sound of bells and chanting, the sight of vibrant sculptures depicting stories of gods and demons. This represents the diversity and drama of earthly life. But as you move closer to the sanctum, the ornamentation simplifies, the path narrows. The final approach to the Garbhagriha is often a dark, narrow passage, forcing the devotee to leave the external world behind, to shed the ego and the senses. Finally, you arrive at the heart of it all, the quiet, dark chamber where the deity resides. Here, there is no distraction, only singular focus. The architecture has successfully guided you from the multiplicity of the external world to the profound unity of the divine center. You have not traveled geographically, you have journeyed cosmologically and spiritually, moving from the periphery of illusion to the core of reality. This transformative experience, engineered into the very stones of the temple, demonstrates the genius of the mythic architect. It shows a deep understanding that true sacred space is not just about housing a god, but about reshaping the human consciousness that comes to visit, using every step, every wall, and every carved image as a tool for inner awakening. While the Hindu temple maps the cosmos for an inward spiritual journey, the ancient Greeks looked upward to a specific, dazzling address, the magnificent palace complex atop Mount Olympus. This was not a vague celestial realm, but a vividly imagined, opulent home for the 12 Olympian gods, a divine acropolis that stood as the ultimate symbol of order, beauty, and political hierarchy. More than just a setting for their myths, Olympus was a powerful architectural ideal, a blueprint for perfection that profoundly influenced how the Greeks built on their own earthly soil. The chief engineer of this heavenly abode was Hephaestus, the god of the forge, craftsmanship, and fire. Unlike his flawlessly beautiful fellow Olympians, Hephaestus was lame and often described as ugly, yet he possessed an unparalleled genius for creation. He was the divine blacksmith, the master artisan who crafted the gods' most powerful weapons and wondrous artifacts. But his crowning achievement was the construction of the palaces on Olympus. The texts describe these divine dwellings with awe: halls of gleaming bronze, imperishable gold and silver, gates fashioned from clouds that opened and closed of their own accord, and courtyards where the gods would feast on ambrosia and nectar. Every detail, from the thrones to the goblets, was a masterpiece of his artistry. Hephaestus, through his skill and intellect, literally built the framework for divine society, creating an environment that reflected the gods' power, immortality, and impeccable taste. His work established a standard of beauty and harmony that became the ultimate aspiration for mortal architects. This heavenly palace was far more than just a beautiful home. It was a meticulous representation of the Greek social and cosmic order. At its head sat Zeus, the king of the gods, his throne positioned to signify his supreme authority. The other deities had their own halls and domains within the complex, their proximity to Zeus reflecting their status and power in the divine hierarchy. This structured layout mirrored the ideal Greek city-state, the polis, with its organized agora, its temples, and its civic centers. Olympus was the perfect polis in the sky, a model of governance and communal living where everyone, from Athena with her wisdom to Ares with his violence, had a defined place and purpose. It was a world without chaos or decay, where order, embodied in its very architecture, reigned eternal. This vision provided a powerful ideological template, suggesting that a well-ordered society here on Earth could itself be a reflection of the divine. Driven by this powerful ideal, the Greeks sought to bring an echo of Olympus down to their own cities. Their temples, like the iconic Parthenon in Athens, were not conceived as gathering places for worshippers but as literal houses for the gods, earthly counterparts to their celestial palaces. The massive statue of Athena Parthenos inside the Parthenon was not a symbol. It was the goddess's presence, and the temple was her home. To make these structures worthy of such a resident, Greek architects employed a series of breathtakingly sophisticated techniques designed to trick the eye into perceiving perfect beauty. They understood that straight lines and mathematical precision could sometimes appear flawed to human perception. So, they introduced subtle curves and adjustments known as intosses. The columns of the Parthenon, for instance, are not straight. They bulge almost imperceptibly in the middle to counteract the optical illusion that would make them appear pinched. The platform on which the temple stands is also slightly curved, rising a few inches toward the center to keep it from appearing to sag under the massive weight of the marble. Every proportion was calculated using sacred ratios like the golden ratio to create a sense of effortless, innate harmony that felt right to the human soul. The goal was to create a structure that was not just mathematically perfect but perceptually perfect, a building that felt divinely balanced and beautiful to anyone who looked upon it. This was the genius of Greek architecture. It used human psychology and advanced geometry to craft an experience of the divine. A mortal standing before the Parthenon would not see a building of cold, rigid stone, but a shimmering, harmonious masterpiece that felt alive and radiant, a tangible piece of Olympus brought within reach. It was an invitation, a deliberate attempt to bridge the gap between the human and the divine by creating a space of such overwhelming perfection that the gods might be persuaded to visit, and in doing so, bless the city and its people with their favor. But if the gods themselves were the master architects, then the tools they wielded were nothing short of natural forces given form. The mythic construction site operated on a set of rules entirely its own, where the impossible was merely a starting point, and the very instruments of creation were as potent as the deities who commanded them. These were not hammers and chisels as mortals would understand them, but extensions of divine will, objects of immense symbolic power that could shape the world itself with a single, thunderous blow. Consider Mjolnir, the mighty hammer of the Norse god Thor. Forged in the heart of a dying star by the dwarven master smiths, this was no ordinary tool. It was an instrument of both cataclysmic destruction and benevolent creation. While Thor is most famous for using it to smash the skulls of giants, its power was also profoundly constructive. Myths and poetic descriptions suggest that with Mjolnir, Thor could level mountains to create fertile plains or even fallow ground, sanctifying it and making it sacred. The hammer was not just a weapon, it was a divine earth mover, a symbol of the thunder that cracks the sky and the lightning that can both shatter a tree and spark a new fire. Its power was that of the storm itself, uncontrollable, raw, and elemental, harnessed to sculpt the landscape according to the will of the gods. This theme of tools embodying natural forces is echoed across the Celtic traditions with Lug Lamfada, the god of all skills and crafts. Lug possessed a sling stone and a magical spear, but his most fascinating asset was perhaps his unseen mastery over the very elements required for construction. He didn't just build, he commanded the wind to carry materials, the earth to settle into firm foundations, and fire to temper metals. His tools were his talents, and his methods were a form of supernatural artistry, a seamless fusion of craft and magic that left no visible mark of labor, only the flawless finished product. This reflects a world view where skilled creation is itself a kind of magic, and the greatest artisan is one who works in harmony with the unseen forces of nature, persuading the world to shape itself rather than forcing it into submission. Perhaps the most vivid illustration of this otherworldly efficiency is found again in the Norse tale of the building of Asgard's wall. The story of the giant builder and his supernatural stallion, Svadilfari, is a masterclass in mythic construction techniques. The giant, with his horse's aid, accomplished what an army of gods could not. By night, the stallion hauled massive blocks of stone with impossible strength and speed, while the giant fitted them together with a precision that defied his enormous size. Their progress was so swift and so flawless that it filled the gods with dread. This narrative brilliantly captures the mythic perspective on divine engineering. It is not a slow, grueling process of human labor. It is swift, mystifying, and operates on a scale and speed that seems to warp time itself. The project was only halted through Loki's trickery, not because the gods could match the builder's skill, but because they had to resort to deception to stop a power they could not otherwise control. These fantastical methods serve a crucial purpose in mythology. They elevate the act of creation from a mundane, human endeavor to a wondrous, supernatural event. By describing walls that rise overnight, mountains shaped by hammer blows, and landscapes altered by divine command, these stories remove all traces of mundane effort. There is no sweat, no long years of backbreaking labor, no failed attempts. The finished structure appears as if from nowhere, a perfect, permanent testament to divine power. This amplifies the marvel of the creation itself, making it feel less like something that was built and more like something that was simply willed into existence. It creates a sense of awe and wonder that separates the works of the gods from the works of mortals, reinforcing the immense gap between human capability and divine power. The myths are not concerned with the how of physics and engineering. They are concerned with the why of meaning and power, using the spectacle of impossible construction to inspire reverence for the cosmic order the gods represent. Yet the most profound legacy of these cultural heroes lies not in the stone they shaped, but in the powerful idea they cemented in the human imagination, that the act of creation itself is a form of magic, a force so potent it can blur the very line between humanity and divinity. Their stories are not just about building, they are about transcendence. They suggest that through a combination of supreme skill, visionary intelligence, and sheer force of will, a mortal can achieve something so extraordinary, so seemingly impossible, that it appears to be the work of the gods. In a world where most people lived and died without leaving a permanent mark, the architect, the one who could literally reshape the landscape and leave a monument that would outlast empires, was the closest thing to a magician. Their blueprints were spells, their construction sites were rituals, and their finished structures were permanent testaments to a power that felt, for all intents and purposes, divine. This deeply ingrained belief, celebrated in myth and memorialized in stone, is why we still look upon ancient wonders with a sense of awe that goes beyond historical curiosity. We are not just seeing clever engineering, we are witnessing the enduring magic of those rare individuals whose genius was so vast, their creations so profound, that they earned a place in the stories of the gods themselves. This powerful impulse to build like the gods was not confined to the pages of myth. It became the driving force behind some of history's most ambitious and enduring real-world construction projects. Ancient civilizations looked up at the heavens, absorbed the descriptions of divine dwellings, and then looked at their own landscapes with a new, transformative goal: to recreate that celestial perfection here on Earth. They operated on a profound and beautiful principle of sympathetic magic, the belief that by physically mimicking the sacred blueprints of the gods, they could attract divine favor, channel cosmic power, and essentially anchor a little piece of heaven within their own communities. This wasn't mere imitation, it was a form of worship, a spiritual technology enacted through stone, geometry, and urban design. We can trace this emulation through a fascinating architectural lineage, perhaps most clearly seen in the evolution of classical temples. The Romans, master engineers in their own right, looked to the Greeks as the ultimate authorities on beauty and sacred form. Greek temple design, with its graceful columns, perfect proportions, and pediments filled with sculpted myths, was itself an attempt to capture the idealized splendor of Mount Olympus. When Roman architects adopted and adapted these forms, giving us the Pantheon with its celestial oculus or the Temple of Saturn in the Forum, they were not just borrowing a style. They were participating in a centuries-old tradition of seeking divine resonance. They believed a temple built according to these hallowed principles would be a more suitable house for a god, a place where the deity would be more inclined to visit and bestow blessings upon the people. The very stone and mortar were seen as a prayer, an invitation written in architecture. This desire to echo divine splendor extended fiercely to the choice of materials. Gold leaf was applied to ceilings and statues not merely for opulence, but because it was believed to be the literal flesh of the gods, an incorruptible, radiant substance that mirrored the immortal realm. Marble was quarried and polished to a brilliant shine not just for its durability, but because its gleaming white surface evoked the cloud-built palaces described in poetry. The shimmering effect of a marble temple under the Mediterranean sun was designed to make the building appear less of this earth and more a transient vision of the divine, a place where the boundary between the mortal and the immortal felt tantalizingly thin. Even the colors used in paint and tile were often chosen for their symbolic, sacred properties, turning entire structures into complex symbolic statements meant to be read on a spiritual level. Perhaps the most ambitious application of this principle moved beyond individual buildings to the design of entire cities. Urban planning became a way to impose a grand, cosmic order upon the chaotic sprawl of human settlement. Many ancient cities were deliberately aligned with the cardinal points north, south, east, and west. This was no arbitrary decision. It was a way of orienting the human community to the fundamental axes of the universe as laid out by the gods. The main streets might align with the rising sun on the solstice, bathing the central thoroughfare in symbolic light of rebirth and divine favor. In China, the ancient art of feng shui guided the placement of buildings, roads, and waterways to ensure the harmonious flow of Qi, or life force, creating a city that was in balance with the natural and cosmic order. The Forbidden City in Beijing is a masterclass in this, its layout a physical manifestation of celestial harmony and imperial power. This practice demonstrates something truly extraordinary about our ancestors. They saw no hard separation between the spiritual and the practical, the mythical and the municipal. The same principles that governed the construction of a temple were applied to the planning of a sewer system. The same cosmic alignments that guided a pyramid's construction were used to lay out a city's grid. Engineering and urban development were, at their core, sacred acts. By building their world to reflect the mythic blueprints of the gods, they believed they were ensuring stability, prosperity, and protection. They were weaving the divine order into the very fabric of their daily lives, creating a world where every walk to the market, every gathering in the forum, was an unconscious participation in a grand cosmic design. Their reality was quite literally built upon the foundations of myth. But these structures do more than just house our rituals. They reach deep into the very wiring of our minds, triggering profound psychological responses that have been carefully engineered over millennia. When we step into the nave of a grand cathedral and our gaze is pulled upward by seemingly impossible vaulted ceilings, or when we stand at the base of a pyramid that has defied the desert for thousands of years, we are not just observing architecture. We are experiencing a carefully crafted psychological event. These spaces, born from divine blueprints, are designed to orchestrate a specific internal journey, one that moves us from the mundane concerns of the everyday toward feelings of awe, reverence, and a powerful sense of connection to something vastly greater than ourselves. This isn't an accidental byproduct, it's the entire point. The Mythic Architects understood intuitively what modern psychology now confirms, that our physical environment has a direct and powerful impact on our mental and emotional state. They designed spaces to deliberately overwhelm our ordinary senses, creating what psychologists call a sense of awe. Awe is that complex emotion we feel in the face of something vast that transcends our current understanding of the world. It's a mixture of wonder, amazement, and even a slight touch of fear. It's the feeling that makes our personal problems seem smaller and pushes our minds to accommodate new, grander ideas. The sheer, inhuman scale of a Gothic cathedral's interior, with its columns stretching like stone trees toward a distant, shadowy ceiling, is a masterclass in triggering this awe. Your eyes struggle to take it all in, your own body feels diminished by the comparison, And in that moment of sensory overload, the mind becomes more receptive, more open to concepts of the infinite and the eternal. This experience is meticulously enhanced by the manipulation of light and sound. Step inside the Sainte-Chapelle in Paris, and you are surrounded by a kaleidoscope of color from its immense stained glass windows. The light that filters through is not the plain white light of the sun. It is transformed into a radiant, jewel-toned glow that paints the interior in hues of ruby, sapphire, and emerald. This transformed light feels sacred, otherworldly. It doesn't illuminate, it sanctifies. Similarly, the acoustics in such spaces are never an afterthought. The long reverberation time in a stone basilica means that a single chanted note or a chord from a pipe organ doesn't just stop. It hangs in the air, swelling and blending into a complex tapestry of sound that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. This sonic environment dissolves the sense of a single, individual source and creates an immersive, collective experience, making it feel as if the building itself is singing. You don't just hear the music, you are surrounded by it, physically feeling the vibration of something immense and holy. This psychological journey is equally potent in ancient structures centered on mortality. The Great Pyramid of Giza does not try to lift your spirit with light and sound. It does so with the sheer, silent weight of eternity. To stand before it is to be confronted with a monument to permanence. While everything around it, kingdoms, languages, even entire religions, has risen and fallen, this structure of cut stone has endured. It forces a contemplation of time on a scale that is almost incomprehensible to the human mind. It whispers of immortality not through beauty, but through stubborn, undeniable existence. This triggers a deep, reflective state where our own fleeting lives are placed in the context of millennia, a perspective that can be simultaneously humbling and strangely comforting. It connects us to the long, unbroken chain of humanity that has stood in that exact same spot, feeling that exact same awe across the centuries. Ultimately, this is why the power of these places endures long after the specific gods they were built for may have faded from common belief. They tap into fundamental, deep-seated human needs, the need to feel part of something larger than ourselves, the need for our lives to have meaning that extends beyond our brief years, and the need to experience wonder and transcendence. In a modern world that can often feel fragmented, commercialized, and devoid of mystery, these architectural wonders offer a rare and powerful opportunity for psychological expansion. They are silent therapists for the soul, designed to quiet the noise of the ego and awaken a sense of reverence for the grand, mysterious tapestry of existence. They remind us that we are hardwired for awe, and that sometimes the most direct path to the sublime is through a door built thousands of years ago by hands guided by a divine imagination. Yet the profound influence of these mythic blueprints was never confined to stone and mortar alone. It poured forth just as powerfully into the ink of poets and the pigments of painters, creating a parallel world of imagined architecture that has captivated the human spirit for millennia. Long before a single foundation stone was laid for a cathedral, the most dazzling structures existed in the realm of story, described with such vivid detail that they became as real to the listener as any physical building. These literary visions provided the original inspiration, the divine source code that artists and architects would spend centuries trying to translate into tangible form. We can trace this lineage back to some of the earliest and most foundational works of Western literature. In Homer's epic poem, the Iliad, the grandeur of the gods' palaces on Mount Olympus is not merely mentioned in passing. It is central to the story's sense of divine scale and power. Homer describes the court of Zeus with its polished floors of bronze, its imperishable walls, and its gates guarded by the Horii, the goddesses of the seasons. This was not a vague, ethereal heaven but a structured, architectural space that operated under its own physical and social laws. A few centuries later, the Roman poet Virgil, in the Aeneid, took this concept even further. He sends his hero, Aeneas, on a journey to the underworld, and there he describes the grand construction projects of the shadowy forges where future Roman heroes are being hammered out on anvils, and the sprawling, mournful fields of the afterlife. These are not just settings, they are active, world-building descriptions that use architecture to define the very nature of the divine and the eternal. They provided a powerful visual vocabulary for the unseen realms, giving artists and thinkers a detailed mental image to work with for generations. This literary foundation exploded into visual splendor during the Renaissance, a period obsessed with reconciling classical learning with Christian faith. Painters, now masters of perspective and realism, turned to these ancient descriptions to visualize the ultimate divine city, the heavenly Jerusalem from the biblical book of Revelation. In works like the stunning frescoes of Renaissance masters, we see the New Jerusalem depicted not as a vague, glowing cloud, but as a meticulously rendered Italian Renaissance city. It has perfect, mathematically precise walls adorned with jewels, grand arches, and spacious plazas, all organized according to the principles of divine symmetry and order. The artists were essentially taking the best of human architectural achievement, the beautiful, orderly cities they saw rising around them, and projecting it onto heaven, imagining that if God were the ultimate architect, his city would be the most perfectly planned metropolis imaginable. These paintings were more than art, they were theological statements arguing for a universe built on reason, harmony, and breathtaking beauty. This tradition of adapting ancient mythic concepts to new contexts has found a vibrant new home in the modern world of fantasy literature and cinema. The genre is essentially a continuation of this ancient impulse to imagine worlds built according to a different, more epic set of architectural rules. J.R.R. Tolkien, a scholar of ancient languages and myths, infused his Middle-earth with structures that feel both ancient and divinely inspired. The White City of Minas Tirith, built on 7 tiers against the face of a mountain, is a direct descendant of the mythical ziggurats and heavenly cities of old. Its design speaks of a lost age of higher craftsmanship and purer intent, a fortress that is both a military stronghold and a sacred space, its white stone gleaming as a last bastion of light against the darkness. Similarly, the elven city of Rivendell is not built upon the landscape but woven into it, with its graceful arches and flowing waterfalls representing an architecture of harmony with nature that feels inherently wise and magical. Today's cinematic blockbusters and video games have become the new canvas for these mythic architectural dreams. Digital artists and concept designers are the modern-day equivalents of the divine architects, using software instead of stone to construct entire worlds. They deliberately use exaggerated scale, impossible physics, and awe-inspiring splendor to instantly communicate the otherworldly nature of these places. The golden, glowing spires of Asgard in the Marvel films, the impossibly tall and narrow towers of a magical university, or the ancient, overgrown ruins of a forgotten civilization in a game like The Legend of Zelda. All of these are designed to trigger that same ancient sense of awe and wonder that the pyramids or the Parthenon inspired. They make us feel small in the best possible way, inviting us to imagine who could have built such a place and what sublime power they must have commanded. This unbroken chain from Homer's verses to a digital render reveals something fundamental about the human imagination. We have never stopped being myth makers. The urge to envision a perfect, divinely ordained structure, whether it's a temple, a city, or an entire world, is a permanent part of our creative psyche. These artistic and literary representations do more than just keep an old idea alive. They constantly refresh and reinvent it, ensuring that the concept of the mythic architect remains as relevant to a viewer in a movie theater today as it was to a listener gathered around a fire 3,000 years ago, hearing for the first time about the bronze-floored halls of Olympus. Yet this ancient fascination with a divine master builder did not fade away with the arrival of the modern age. Instead, it simply found new languages and new mediums through which to express that same profound human yearning. The concept of the mythic architect has continuously evolved, shape-shifting to align with our changing understanding of the universe, moving from the realm of gods and goddesses to embrace secret societies, theoretical science, and even digital code. This enduring idea proves that our need to see a conscious design behind reality is not a primitive superstition we have outgrown, but a deep and persistent strand of our collective psyche, constantly adapting to the spirit of the times. One of the most fascinating chapters in this evolution began with the rise of Freemasonry. This fraternal organization, which emerged from the guilds of actual stonemasons in the late medieval period, transformed the tangible tools of the builder's craft into powerful symbolic tools for moral and spiritual development. For Freemasons, the mythic architect is known as the great architect of the universe, a non-denominational divine principle that designed the cosmos with geometric perfection. Their rituals are steeped in the symbolism of the square, the compass, and the level instruments once used to erect cathedrals, now used to teach lessons of truth, balance, and ethical conduct. They saw sacred geometry not as a way to build temples to specific gods, but as a universal key to understanding a rational, ordered, and benevolent creation. In this way, the Masons became the direct inheritors of the ancient tradition, preserving the idea of a cosmic architect while reframing it for an era that was beginning to prize reason and enlightenment, proving that the search for divine order could coexist with a growing scientific worldview. As science itself advanced, offering new explanations for the origins of the cosmos and life itself, the concept of the mythic architect evolved once more. The 20th century's fascination with ancient astronauts and extraterrestrial intelligence can be seen as a direct, albeit speculative, continuation of this ancient theme. When we couldn't attribute the pyramids or other megalithic wonders to known human technology, a new kind of mythic architect was proposed, the alien engineer. Figures like Erich von Däniken suggested that these structures were not built by gods or by humans with divine inspiration, but by advanced visitors from other worlds. This idea, popularized in books and documentaries, simply swapped the pantheon of Olympus for a pantheon of stars, maintaining the core belief that our world and its wonders were the product of a superior, intentional intelligence. It was a modern mythology for a spacefaring age, satisfying the same old hunger for a designer by giving it a futuristic, technological face. This technological reinterpretation reaches its logical, and perhaps most mind-bending, conclusion in the late 20th and 21st centuries with the simulation hypothesis. This is the philosophical proposal that our entire reality might not be a biological or divine creation, but an artificial construct, a kind of hyper-advanced digital simulation run by a vastly superior civilization. This theory, debated by philosophers and even some prominent technologists, is the ultimate expression of the mythic architect for the digital age. It updates the concept with the vocabulary of computing. We are not living in a universe built by a god, but in a universe rendered by a programmer. The ultimate mythic architect becomes a coder, and the sacred geometry of the ancients is replaced by the flawless, mathematical laws of physics, which are seen as the underlying source code of reality. This brings us to one of the most iconic modern pop culture manifestations of this idea, the architect in the 2003 film The Matrix Reloaded. Dressed in sterile white and speaking in cold, precise logic, this character is the literal architect of the simulated reality known as the Matrix. He is not a loving creator god, but a ruthless systems administrator concerned with balance, equations, and control. He represents order without compassion, design without divinity. And yet, his role is fundamentally the same as that of Ptah or Vishvakarma. He is the intelligence behind the structure of the world, the one who built the system with its rules and its purposes. The fact that this character resonated so powerfully with audiences speaks to how deeply ingrained the archetype remains. We instantly understood his function because we have been telling stories about cosmic architects for thousands of years. The film simply gave him a new suit and a computer terminal. From the sacred rituals of Freemasonry to the sci-fi speculations of alien builders and simulated realities, this relentless evolution reveals a crucial truth about humanity. Our quest is not for a specific answer, but for the reassurance that an answer exists at all. We are pattern-seeking creatures living in a vast and often indifferent universe, and the idea of a mythic architect in any form provides the profound comfort of intentionality. It suggests that the chaos we sometimes see is merely a veil over a deeper order, that the complexity of existence is not random but designed. Whether we call this designer God, the great architect, an ancient astronaut, or a simulation programmer, the underlying impulse is identical: a deep-seated need to believe that our reality, with all its beauty and its terror, is not an accident. It is the story we have always told ourselves, and as our tools and our knowledge change, we simply continue writing that story with whatever language we have available, forever reaching for the blueprint behind it all. Yet for all the grandeur attributed to gods like Ptah and Vishvakarma, the narrative of the mythic architect has too often been framed as a predominantly male endeavor. This narrow focus overlooks a rich and vital tradition found in cultures across the globe: the powerful presence of the goddess as master builder, the divine feminine as the source of architectural wisdom and creative force. These female figures challenge the stereotype of the architect as a solitary male genius, revealing instead a more nuanced and diverse understanding of creation, one that often intertwines intellectual design with nurturing sustenance, blending the drafting table with the hearth. Consider the Mesopotamian goddess Nisaba. In the pantheon of Sumer, she was revered not merely as a minor deity of scribes, but as the profound patron of writing, architecture, and most significantly, wisdom itself. She was the divine surveyor, the one who held the sacred measuring rod and the stylus. Before a single brick could be laid for a temple or a ziggurat, Nisaba's knowledge was essential. She was believed to inscribe the divine blueprints on the clay tablets of fate, determining the precise, sacred dimensions and orientation that would make a structure pleasing to the gods and harmonious with the cosmos. Her role was foundational. She provided the intellectual and spiritual framework without which no physical construction could begin or succeed. She embodies the critical truth that the most important tool of the architect is not the chisel or the hammer, but the mind, the capacity for calculation, foresight, and inspired design. Nisaba represents the fusion of intellect and artistry, proving that the conception of sacred space is an act of profound wisdom. Traveling west to the Celtic world, we encounter the multifaceted goddess Brigid. She is a figure of fire and forge, of poetry and healing, but she is also intimately linked to craftsmanship and the creation of sacred spaces. As a patron of smithcraft, she presided over the transformative magic of the forge, where raw metal was heated, hammered, and shaped into useful and beautiful objects. This mastery over transformation extends directly to the realm of building. The smith was not just a maker of weapons. In many ancient societies, the smith was also the toolmaker, providing the essential implements, the axes, saws, and nails that made large-scale construction possible. Brigid's fire is the creative spark that fuels all craftsmanship, from the forging of a delicate brooch to the raising of a temple roof. Furthermore, her deep connection to sacred wells and perpetual flames highlights her role in sanctifying space, in turning a location from merely physical to deeply spiritual. She doesn't just build the structure, she imbues it with a protective, nurturing, and healing presence, making it a true home for the divine and for the community. The stories of these goddesses and others like them fundamentally expand our understanding of what mythic engineering truly entails. Their power is rarely expressed through the imagery of solitary, top-down command or violent conquest over chaotic materials, as we sometimes see with male creator gods. Instead, their creative process is often portrayed as more collaborative, organic, and integrative. It is a creativity that emerges from wisdom and nurturance, from a deep understanding of the materials and the purpose of the creation. It is less about imposing will and more about guiding a process into being, much like a wise teacher or a skilled midwife. This perspective reframes the act of creation from an act of dominance to an act of cultivation, suggesting that the most enduring structures, whether physical, social, or spiritual, are those that are thoughtfully designed and caringly sustained. This inclusion is not merely about correcting a historical oversight. It profoundly enriches the entire narrative of mythic architecture. It showcases the incredible diversity of cultural thought, demonstrating that ancient peoples had vastly different and more complex ideas about power, creation, and gender than a simplistic, male-dominated mythology would suggest. By acknowledging Nisaba, Brigid, and their sisters across other pantheons, we see a much fuller picture of the divine. We see that the impulse to design, to build, and to create order from chaos was never the sole province of one gender. It was understood as a universal, divine capacity, expressed through a beautiful spectrum of energies, both masculine and feminine. These goddesses remind us that the blueprint for reality was drawn with many hands, and that the sacred spaces we inhabit, both physical and metaphorical, were shaped by a collaboration of powers as diverse and creative as humanity itself. This profound interplay between the sacred and the celestial perhaps finds its most iconic expression in the windswept Salisbury Plain of England. Stonehenge, that mysterious ring of standing stones, is far more than a primitive monument. It is a sophisticated astronomical observatory engineered in stone. Its entire layout is a deliberate alignment with the movements of the sun. The central axis is carefully oriented so that on the summer solstice, the longest day of the year, the rising sun crests the horizon and shines directly through the monument's entrance, sending a blade of light slicing through the heart of the stone circle. This was not a happy accident. It was the entire point. For the Neolithic people who built it, this annual event was a moment of supreme cosmic significance. It marked a turning point in the year, a promise of the sun's return and the continued fertility of the land. The architecture itself served as a colossal calendar and a ceremonial stage for rituals that reinforced their connection to the divine order of the heavens, a permanent stone prayer aimed directly at the sun. This practice of solar alignment was a global phenomenon, a universal language of sacred architecture. On the other side of the world, in the golden sands of Egypt, the immense temple of Karnak performs a similar celestial dance, but with the winter solstice. The temple's main axis is precisely oriented so that on the shortest day of the year, the setting sun plunges directly down the lengthy corridor of the hypostyle hall, flooding the inner sanctum dedicated to the god Amun-Ra with its dying light. In the Egyptian worldview, the sun god Ra undertook a perilous journey through the underworld each night. The winter solstice represented the weakest, most vulnerable point in his cycle. By designing the temple to capture the sun's rays at this precise, critical moment, the priests were performing an act of profound spiritual engineering. They were using architecture to aid their god, to help recharge his power and ensure his victorious rebirth at dawn, thus guaranteeing the continuation of creation itself. The temple was a machine for maintaining cosmic balance. This celestial choreography extended beyond the sun to the fixed stars, which were seen as the immutable, eternal backdrop of the divine plan. The Maya of Mesoamerica were master astronomers, and their step pyramids, like the famous El Castillo at Chichén Itzá, are breathtaking examples of this astro-architectural fusion. The structure is designed with 4 sides, each featuring a staircase with 91 steps. When you add the top platform as the final step, you get 365 steps, one for each day of the solar year. But the genius doesn't stop there. During the spring and autumn equinoxes, the angle of the setting sun interacts with the step terraces to create a stunning optical illusion, an undulating serpent of light and shadow that appears to slither down the side of the pyramid, connecting the heavens to the earth in a visible, dramatic manifestation of the feathered serpent god Kukulkan. The building itself becomes a dynamic participant in a celestial event, a stone prophecy that comes to life only when the earth and sun reach a specific, preordained relationship in space. What unites these diverse structures from the megaliths of Britain to the pyramids of the Yucatan is a shared, foundational belief that the universe is not a random collection of objects but a carefully designed system, a cosmic architecture. The gods, the original mythic architects, had arranged the heavens with perfect mathematical order. The sun, moon, and stars did not wander arbitrarily. They moved along divine pathways according to an eternal, predictable schedule. For humanity, the greatest act of reverence and imitation was to bring that celestial order down to earth. By aligning their most sacred structures with these heavenly movements, they were essentially grounding the cosmos. They were weaving the perfect, eternal rhythms of the heavens into the imperfect, temporal world of human existence. A temple aligned with a solstice became a fixed point where heaven and earth met, a place where the divine blueprint was made visible and tangible. It transformed their architecture from a passive container of belief into an active instrument for interacting with the gods, a permanent testament to their understanding that to live in harmony with the cosmos, you first had to build in harmony with it. But the grand ambition to build like the gods always carried with it a profound and sobering warning, a moral dimension etched into the very foundation of these myths. For ancient cultures, construction was never a neutral act. It was deeply intertwined with questions of proper ambition, human limitation, and our rightful place in the cosmic order. These stories served as the conscience of the builder, teaching that even the most awe-inspiring project could crumble into ruin if it was fueled not by reverence but by arrogant pride. No story captures this cautionary lesson more powerfully than the biblical tale of the Tower of Babel. Here, humanity, speaking a single language and possessing unified purpose, decides to build a city with a tower so immense that its top would reach the heavens. On the surface, this seems like the ultimate expression of human cooperation and technological achievement, a project worthy of the mythic architects themselves. But the story reveals a fatal flaw in their intent. Their motivation was not to honor the divine or to create something beautiful in harmony with creation. Their stated goal was to make a name for ourselves and to prevent themselves from being scattered over the face of the whole earth. This was an act of pure hubris, a direct challenge to divine authority, an attempt to storm the gates of heaven through sheer engineering might rather than spiritual merit. The divine response is not one of admiration but of corrective action. By confusing their language and scattering them across the globe, the myth delivers its stark ethical verdict. There is a sacred boundary between human and divine creation that cannot be crossed through arrogant ambition. The tower remains forever unfinished, a perpetual monument to the folly of overreaching pride, a silent reminder that some realms are meant to remain beyond human grasp. This theme of divine punishment for architectural hubris finds a chilling echo in the Greek myth of Laomedon, the king of Troy. He hires the gods Apollo and Poseidon, who are serving a temporary term of mortal service, to build the massive, impregnable walls around his city. The two divine beings, the ultimate mythic architects, throw themselves into the task, constructing defenses of legendary strength. But when the work is complete, Laomedon brazenly refuses to pay them the wages he had promised. His betrayal is not just a breach of contract, it is a catastrophic failure to recognize the sacred nature of the work and the divine status of the builders. His arrogance in believing he could cheat the gods themselves brings a terrible curse upon Troy, setting in motion a chain of events that would eventually lead to the city's famous downfall. The story teaches that a project built with divine assistance carries a sacred obligation. To treat such a collaboration with dishonor is to invite inevitable ruin, suggesting that the ethical conduct of the patron is just as important as the skill of the builder in ensuring a structure's enduring legacy. Yet for every tale of hubris, there is a counter-narrative that celebrates the sacred potential of cooperation between the human and the divine, highlighting the virtues of humility, reverence, and shared purpose. Look at the countless myths where gods provide the inspiration, the tools, or the sacred knowledge, while humans contribute their labor, their devotion, and their skill. The construction of the Jewish tabernacle in the book of Exodus is a powerful example. God provides Moses with the intricate, divine blueprint on Mount Sinai, down to the precise measurements and materials for every curtain, altar, and artifact. But the execution is entrusted to Bezalel and Oholiab, two artisans who are specifically filled with the Spirit of God, with wisdom, with understanding, with knowledge, and with all kinds of skills to carry out the work. This is not a story of humans building alone, nor of gods building for them. It is a story of partnership. The humans are elevated by divine inspiration, their natural talents sanctified and directed toward a holy purpose. The project succeeds because it is founded on obedience, humility, and a shared goal, to create a dwelling place for the divine that honors the giver of the plans. This ethical framework gave ancient societies a powerful lens through which to view not only their myths but their own real-world architectural triumphs. The pyramids, the great temples, the colossal statues, these were not just expressions of a pharaoh's or a king's ego. They were, in the ideal, acts of piety. The immense resources and labor required were justified as a collective offering to the gods, a way for the entire community to participate in a project that reinforced cosmic order and secured divine favor. The moral lesson was clear. Ambition was laudable only when it was in service to something greater than oneself. A ruler who built a magnificent temple was seen as righteous and pious, fulfilling his duty to the gods and his people. A ruler who built solely for his own glory, however, risked being remembered as a tyrant whose works were built on the backs of suffering and pride. This deep ethical layer is precisely why these stories resonated so powerfully for thousands of years. They were not just entertaining fables about the past, they were living guides for the present. They answered fundamental questions about the human condition. How high should we aim? What are the responsibilities that come with great knowledge and power? What is the proper relationship between humanity and the forces that created the universe? By embedding these lessons in the dramatic and memorable context of mythic construction, ancient cultures ensured that their most cherished values, the dangers of hubris, the importance of humility, the sacredness of a promise, and the beauty of cooperation, would be passed down through every generation, as enduring as the stones of the very structures they inspired. While cultures across the globe have built their mythic architectures with different materials and for different deities, a fascinating pattern emerges when we step back to look at the entire tapestry of human belief. It's as if these diverse civilizations, entirely isolated from one another, were all working from a shared subconscious blueprint, a deep psychological need to imagine a central, stabilizing structure that could hold the entire cosmos together. This universal concept is known as the axis mundi, the world axis, a sacred pillar or tree that connects the heavens, the earth, and the underworld, creating a point of absolute order amid the chaos of existence. This is perhaps the most profound and widespread architectural metaphor ever conceived by the human imagination, a testament to our universal longing for a center, a foundation, and a connection to the divine. In the frozen, warrior-driven world of Norse mythology, this cosmic axis takes the form of Yggdrasil, the immense and terrifying world ash tree. Its name itself hints at its fearful majesty, often translated as Odin's horse, a reference to the god who hanged himself from its branches for 9 nights to gain the secrets of the runes. Yggdrasil is not a peaceful, beautiful tree in a garden. It is a colossal, struggling entity that forms the entire framework of the Norse cosmos. Its 3 great roots stretch down into 3 separate wells, one in the realm of the gods, one in the land of the frost giants, and one in the chilling mist of the underworld, Niflheim. Its branches stretch high above, holding the 9 realms within its boughs like fruits. An eagle perched at its top and a dragon gnawing at its roots constantly threaten its stability, while the squirrel Ratatoska runs up and down its trunk, carrying insults between them. Yggdrasil is a living, breathing, and suffering piece of architecture, a symbol of a universe that is dynamic, interconnected, and perpetually under threat, requiring constant vigilance and sacrifice to maintain its balance. Now travel thousands of miles and several centuries east to the moment when the historical prince Siddhartha Gautama sat in meditation beneath another tree in Bodh Gaya, India. This tree, the Bodhi tree or tree of awakening, serves as a profoundly different yet spiritually parallel axis mundi. It is not a cosmic structure holding up physical realms, but a psychological and spiritual axis for an individual's enlightenment. As Siddhartha sat beneath it, resisting temptation and piercing through the illusions of the material world, the tree became the unwavering center of his universe, the fixed point around which his consciousness achieved liberation. It represents the still point within the storm of human suffering and desire. In Buddhist iconography, the Bodhi tree is not portrayed as a struggling entity like Yggdrasil, but as a serene and sacred focal point, a living testament that the path to the ultimate reality, nirvana, is found by turning inward and finding that central, unshakable truth within oneself. It is an axis of mind and spirit, not of separate physical worlds. This theme of a central, connecting structure finds another powerful, and perhaps unexpected, expression in the Christian symbol of the cross. While not a naturally occurring tree, its symbolism is deeply rooted in the concept of the axis mundi. In Christian theology, the crucifixion of Jesus Christ on the wooden cross is seen as the pivotal event in all of history, the moment that reconciled heaven and earth. The cross is often interpreted as the tree of life, a direct counterpoint to the tree of the knowledge of good and evil in the Garden of Eden. It becomes the new world tree, its vertical beam seen as bridging the gap between God and humanity, while its horizontal beam represents the love and connection extending to all people across the earth. It transforms from an instrument of brutal execution into the ultimate symbol of salvation and connection, a spiritual axis upon which the entire cosmic order was realigned. It is a piece of architecture born from sacrifice, designed not by human hands but by divine purpose to serve as a permanent conduit for grace. What is truly astounding is that despite these radical differences, a struggling ash tree, a serene fig tree, and a Roman execution device, all 3 symbols serve an identical core function. They are all architectural metaphors for cosmic order. Yggdrasil provides the physical structure for the Norse universe. The Bodhi tree provides the spiritual structure for achieving enlightenment. The cross provides the theological structure for salvation and the reconciliation of all creation. Each one addresses a fundamental, universal human anxiety, the fear that existence is random, chaotic, and without a center. These Axis Mundi symbols are the ultimate answer to that fear. They assert that there is a center, there is a point of connection, there is a stable pillar around which everything else revolves, a way to navigate between the various levels of reality, whether they are physical realms, states of consciousness, or spiritual conditions. This comparative glimpse reveals the true genius of the mythic architect archetype. It shows that these divine figures, whether they are called Odin, the principles of Dharma, or God, are ultimately addressing the same profound human concerns. They are not just building palaces or temples, they are engineering answers to our deepest questions about stability, meaning, and our place in the grand scheme of things. They use the powerful language of architecture, the pillar, the bridge, the axis to give form to the formless, providing an imaginative and comforting blueprint for a universe that is, at its heart, ordered, interconnected, and ultimately meaningful. They built these structures in the landscape of the human soul long before a single stone was ever laid upon another. This enduring fascination with sacred geometry and cosmic harmony did not vanish with the ancient world. It simply found new forms of expression, seamlessly weaving itself into the very fabric of modern design. The legacy of the mythic architect is not confined to dusty ruins and old stories. It lives on in the soaring skylines of our cities and the thoughtful layouts of our homes, proving that our desire to build meaningful, transcendent spaces is a timeless human impulse. Today's architects may use computer-aided design and steel girders instead of stone blocks and chisels, but they are often guided by the same fundamental principles that inspired the builders of the Parthenon or the Great Pyramids: the pursuit of beauty, balance, and a deep connection to something greater than ourselves. We can see this most clearly in the continued, almost instinctual, use of sacred proportions. The golden ratio, that mystical mathematical relationship of approximately 1 to 1.618 that the Greeks found so essential to beauty, is still a powerful, if sometimes subconscious, tool in the modern designer's kit. While a contemporary architect might not explicitly invoke the name of a god, they understand that certain proportions simply feel right to the human eye. This ratio can be found in the elegant spiral of a nautilus shell, and it is deliberately employed in the layout of everything from the facades of sleek skyscrapers to the user interfaces on our phones, creating a sense of innate harmony and order that resonates on a deeply psychological level. It's a silent echo of the ancient belief that the universe is built on a foundation of perfect mathematics, and that by incorporating this divine language into our structures, we can create objects and spaces of enduring appeal and quiet power. Beyond mere proportion, the most profound modern architectural projects are those that seek to evoke the same sense of awe and transcendence that ancient temples were designed to inspire. Consider the hushed, reverential atmosphere inside a world-class concert hall like the Walt Disney Concert Hall in Los Angeles. Its undulating, metallic curves are not just a stylistic choice, they are meticulously engineered to create an immersive auditory and visual experience that lifts the spirit. The way light plays across its surfaces and the way sound resonates within its walls is intended to transport the audience, to create a collective moment of beauty that feels almost sacred. Similarly, memorials like the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C., use the power of architecture to guide a profound emotional journey. The simple, stark, descending black granite wall, engraved with the names of the fallen, creates a visceral experience of loss, reflection, and remembrance. It is a space that demands introspection, using its form and material to facilitate a connection to memory and sacrifice, in a way that is every bit as powerful as any ancient tomb. These are not just buildings, they are modern-day sacred spaces engineered for emotional and psychological impact. This philosophical thread is perhaps best exemplified by the work and writings of Frank Lloyd Wright, who passionately championed his concept of organic architecture. Wright believed that a building should not be an alien object placed upon the land, but should grow naturally from its site, harmonizing with its environment. His iconic Fallingwater house, cantilevered directly over a natural waterfall, is a masterful realization of this ideal. The structure doesn't dominate the landscape. It converses with it, its horizontal lines echoing the rock ledges and its materials blending with the surrounding forest. This philosophy is a direct, conscious echo of ancient beliefs in cosmic balance and the divine natural order. Wright wasn't just designing a house, he was expressing a worldview, one that sees the divine not in a distant heaven, but in the intricate, beautiful order of the natural world, and believes our role is to live in respectful harmony with it. This brings us to what is perhaps the most urgent and relevant modern iteration of this ancient principle: sustainable and regenerative design. The current movement in architecture that prioritizes green building materials, energy efficiency, and a minimal environmental footprint is, at its heart, a profound ethical and spiritual shift. It is the modern expression of the idea that we must work with the divine natural order, not against it. Where ancient cultures aligned their temples with the solstice sun to honor the gods of nature, we now orient our buildings and install solar panels to capture that same sun's energy respectfully and efficiently. Where they used locally sourced stone to blend their structures into the landscape, we seek out sustainable timber and recycled materials to reduce our impact on the earth. This is not merely a technical response to climate change, it is a moral and philosophical stance. It recognizes that the planet itself is the ultimate sacred structure, a complex, life-giving system that we are a part of, and that our own creations must honor and protect that system. In this sense, the sustainable architect is the modern mythic builder, whose responsibility is to design a world where humanity can thrive without disrupting the delicate cosmic balance we have finally learned to appreciate. Yet for all the power and beauty of these myths, a persistent and popular modern narrative has emerged that threatens to strip our ancestors of their greatest credit. It's the idea that these magnificent structures were simply too advanced, too perfect, too colossal to be the work of human hands alone. This has given rise to theories of alien intervention, suggesting that extraterrestrial engineers provided the technology, or even that ancient astronauts themselves built the pyramids, Stonehenge, and other marvels. While these stories can be entertaining, they fundamentally misunderstand both the nature of mythology and the astounding capabilities of ancient human civilizations. This isn't just a harmless fantasy, it's a form of intellectual theft that robs past cultures of their ingenuity, their hard work, and their rightful place in history as master builders in their own right. The logic behind these alien theories often hinges on a perceived technological impossibility. How could people without modern machinery or advanced mathematics move multi-ton stones with such precision? How could they achieve such perfect astronomical alignments? The underlying assumption is that our ancestors were primitive, almost childlike in their capabilities, and therefore incapable of such sophisticated work. This assumption is not only incorrect, it's a deeply condescending view of history. It ignores the vast, painstaking, and brilliantly innovative archaeological evidence that paints a very different picture, one of incredible human ingenuity, meticulous long-term planning, and a profound willingness to dedicate generations of labor to a sacred vision. Take the Great Pyramid of Giza. We don't need to invoke aliens to explain its construction. We have the remains of the workers' village at Giza, which show a highly organized community of skilled laborers who are well fed with bread and beer, received medical care, and were likely not slaves but proud citizens participating in a national project of religious significance. We have archaeological evidence of the quarries where the stones were cut, and we understand the likely use of massive, well-greased sleds dragged along specially prepared causeways, employing the principles of friction and leverage that they knew intimately. The precision of the alignment that was achieved through simple yet brilliantly effective celestial observation, by tracking the shadows of a central gnomon, a vertical stick, over the course of a day and throughout the year, ancient astronomers could mark true north with astonishing accuracy. These were not magical acts, they were the products of careful observation, generations of accumulated knowledge, and a society capable of mobilizing and organizing its people toward a single, glorious goal. This is where the true magic lies, not in imagined alien technology, but in the breathtaking power of human collaboration and cultural purpose. The construction of these wonders was a testament to what a society can achieve when it is unified by a shared belief system and a common goal. The same drive that leads modern nations to pour resources into particle accelerators or space exploration, the desire for knowledge, prestige, and a connection to something larger than ourselves, is what drove ancient Egyptians to build pyramids, or the people of Neolithic Britain to haul bluestones hundreds of miles for Stonehenge. To attribute their work to aliens is to dismiss the immense social organization, the architectural genius, and the sheer willpower that these projects required. It ignores the fact that innovation is not linear, and that ancient cultures developed their own forms of advanced knowledge perfectly suited to their environment and their needs. So, if these structures weren't built by aliens, what do we do with the myths that say they were built by gods? This is the crucial distinction we must make. Mythology is not a failed version of history or a primitive attempt at science. It is a different kind of truth altogether, a cultural and psychological truth. The ancient Egyptians did not literally believe that aliens built the pyramids. They believed the god Thoth provided the divine blueprint, and that the pharaoh was a god king whose ascent to the stars was essential for the cosmos to function. The myth was not meant to be a literal construction report. It was a way to express the profound spiritual significance of the building. It was a narrative that connected the pharaoh, the people, and the very structure itself to the divine order of the universe. The myth explained the why, while the human engineers brilliantly solved the how. Appreciating this distinction allows us to hold two beautiful truths in our hands at once. We can look at the Great Pyramid and feel a dual sense of awe for the tangible, historical achievement of the thousands of men and women who designed and built it with their intelligence and sweat, and awe for the powerful, enduring myth that gave their work its ultimate meaning. One truth does not cancel out the other, they enrich each other. The historical facts give us a profound respect for human capability, while the myths connect us to the timeless human questions of purpose, divinity, and our place in the cosmos. By debunking the alien myth, we don't diminish the wonder of the pyramids. We actually restore it to its rightful owners, the ingenious, determined, and spiritually profound people who, thousands of years ago, looked at a stone quarry and a stretch of desert and envisioned a machine for immortality, and then had the sheer audacity to make that vision real. But the true genius of these mythic architects went far beyond mere symbolism or structural stability. Their most profound innovation was understanding that a sacred space is not just a container for ritual, it is an instrument for transformation, a carefully engineered environment designed to orchestrate a complete sensory and psychological experience. This was spiritual engineering in its purest form, where every element of architecture, light, sound, material, and volume, was meticulously calibrated to guide a visitor from the mundane worries of the everyday world into an elevated state of awareness, facilitating a direct and personal encounter with the divine. These builders were not just masons and carpenters, They were masters of human consciousness, using their craft to build bridges between the physical and the spiritual realms. Consider the breathtaking achievement of the Gothic cathedral. To step inside a structure like Notre Dame de Paris or Chartres is to be immediately enveloped in an atmosphere of otherworldly awe, an effect achieved through a deliberate manipulation of space and light. The architect's ambition was to create a glimpse of heaven on earth, and they did this by seemingly defying physics itself. Soaring rib vaults and flying buttresses allowed them to build higher and higher, creating vast, cavernous naves that dwarf the human form, making you feel simultaneously insignificant and yet part of something immense and magnificent. But the true magic is overhead. Instead of solid stone ceilings, they engineered vast canvases of glass, filling the walls with intricate stained glass windows. This was not merely decoration, it was a calculated theological statement. Sunlight passing through these windows is transformed, shattered into 1,000 fragments of ruby, sapphire, emerald, and gold, which then dance across the stone floors and pillars. This transformed light does not illuminate in the ordinary sense, it sanctifies. It feels different, mysterious, charged, and divine. The biblical stories depicted in the glass were called the poor man's Bible, a way to teach scripture to an illiterate populace. But more importantly, the experience of being bathed in this kaleidoscopic, colored light was meant to simulate the radiant glory of God's presence, suggesting that the very air within the cathedral was infused with a heavenly essence unavailable outside its walls. This holistic engineering of experience extends beautifully to the realm of sound. In a Hindu temple, the journey toward the inner sanctum is accompanied by a rich tapestry of sacred noise designed to shift your mental state. The outer courtyards are often filled with the lively sounds of community chanting, the ringing of bells, and the murmur of prayers. Bells or ganta are not just rung to announce one's presence to the deity. Their sonic vibration is believed to purify the atmosphere, driving away negative energies and clearing the mind for meditation. The specific tonal frequencies of chanting mantras, like the universal Om, are thought to resonate with the fundamental frequency of the universe itself, aligning the individual's internal energy with the cosmic order. As you move inward through the temple's concentric circles, the auditory landscape changes. The noisy, communal sounds of the outer gates give way to a more focused hum, and finally, in the dark, quiet stillness of the Garbhagriha, the womb chamber, there is often only the sound of your own breath or the silent repetition of a mantra in your mind. The architecture, through its layout and acoustics, has effectively used sound as a tool to guide you on an inward journey, from the distraction of the external world to the profound silence of your own consciousness. This meticulous attention to sensory detail reveals the core principle of mythic engineering: architecture as an active participant in worship, not a passive backdrop. The designers understood that spiritual awakening isn't an intellectual exercise. It is a full-body, full-sensory experience. The coolness of a stone floor under your knees, the scent of old incense and melted wax, the way your voice is swallowed by the vastness of a dome or focused by the intimacy of a small chapel, all of these elements were thoughtfully considered. They were building a psychological pathway, using the language of the senses to bypass the critical, doubting mind and speak directly to the soul. A pilgrim did not just go to these places to see something, they went to feel something, to be changed by the environment itself. The sacred space was understood as a kind of spiritual catalyst, a designed environment that made the transcendent more accessible, more tangible, and more real for every person who stepped across its threshold. In this way, the mythic architects achieved their ultimate goal. They didn't just build houses for the gods, they built machines for making contact with them. Yet these awe-inspiring structures, designed to elevate the human spirit, were never free from the gravitational pull of earthly power. The same mythic blueprints used to connect humanity to the divine were also masterfully drafted to reinforce a very specific and very terrestrial message: who rules and why they deserve to. From the cloud-high palaces of the gods to the monumental temples built by kings, mythic architecture has always been a potent tool for political propaganda, a way to weave spiritual belief and social hierarchy into an inseparable tapestry of stone and story, legitimizing authority by anchoring it in the very bedrock of the cosmos. We can see this dynamic play out most clearly by examining the divine realm itself. The palaces of the gods were never described as cozy cottages or democratic communes. They were meticulously designed to reflect a strict celestial chain of command. Take the Greek Mount Olympus, a divine acropolis built by Hephaestus. Its layout was a direct architectural expression of power. Zeus's throne was the central, dominant feature, with the other gods' halls arranged around it in order of their status and influence. This wasn't just a convenient floor plan, it was a constant, visible reinforcement of an unchallengeable pecking order. The message to any god or any human hearing the story was clear: there is a supreme authority, and his house is built to prove it. This divine architecture provided the ultimate template for human rulers. If the king of the gods lived in a palace that screamed absolute power, then an earthly king who wanted to be seen as that god's representative on earth had to build in a way that echoed that same hierarchical splendor, just on a slightly smaller scale. This is where the construction of temples becomes so politically charged. When a pharaoh commissioned a new temple to Amun-Ra or a Roman emperor funded a vast new forum, they were doing much more than simply honoring a deity. They were engaging in a spectacular act of public relations. The sheer scale of these projects, requiring the mobilization of thousands of workers, the control of vast resources, and the coordination of immense logistical networks, was itself a powerful display of the ruler's wealth, organizational skill, and control over his people. It was a non-verbal declaration: look what I can command. But the propaganda went deeper than just showing off. By building a house for a god, the ruler was positioning himself as the crucial intermediary between the divine and the human world. He was the one facilitating the relationship, the one ensuring the gods remained happy and the cosmic order was maintained. His right to rule was therefore not just a matter of birth or conquest. It was a divine mandate etched in stone for all to see. The temple's grandeur reflected well on the god, but it reflected just as brilliantly on the patron who built it. A masterclass in this political use of mythic architecture comes from the reign of Rome's first emperor, Augustus. After decades of brutal civil war, Rome was fractured and its traditional values felt weakened. Augustus's genius was not just winning the war, but winning the peace by masterfully crafting a new narrative of renewal and divine favor. He launched an incredible building program, restoring 82 temples that had fallen into disrepair and constructing magnificent new ones. But this was far more than urban renewal. It was ideological reconstruction. Augustus presented himself as the restorer of the cosmic order, the pious leader who was returning Rome to its golden age by honoring the gods properly. The magnificent Aura Passus, or Altar of Peace, covered in sculptures depicting the emperor and his family participating in solemn religious rites, sent a clear message: under Augustus, peace and piety had returned because he was in perfect alignment with the divine will. His power was not tyrannical, it was necessary, sacred, and the very source of the era's new prosperity. This political dimension forces us to reread ancient monuments with a more critical eye. The towering statue of a pharaoh smiting his enemies at the entrance to a temple is not just a historical record, it is a warning and a statement of divinely backed power. The immense, idealized statues of Augustus distributed throughout the empire were not just portraits, they were ubiquitous reminders of a singular, god-like authority whose reach was everywhere. The architecture itself became a language of control, speaking of hierarchy, order, and the dire consequences of challenging the status quo. It blended the spiritual and the political so completely that to question the king was to risk upsetting the gods, and to doubt the gods was to undermine the king. This fusion created a powerfully stable, self-reinforcing system of belief and power that could endure for centuries. Understanding this dual purpose doesn't diminish the beauty of these structures. Instead, it adds a fascinating layer of human complexity. It reveals that these stones were not only prayers to the heavens, but also carefully crafted arguments about power on earth, reminding us that the most enduring structures are often those that successfully answer the most fundamental human questions: who is in charge and why should we obey them? This ambition to build in harmony with the divine didn't stop at the temple gate. It expanded to encompass the entire city, transforming urban planning into the largest-scale act of sacred imitation imaginable. Ancient civilizations didn't just want their holy places to reflect the cosmos. They wanted their entire world to do so. They sought to organize the chaotic, unpredictable nature of human settlement into a perfect divine pattern, believing that by doing so, they could attract prosperity, ensure stability, and secure the perpetual protection of the gods. The mythic architect provided the foundational blueprint, and humanity set about trying to replicate it on a grand, breathtaking scale. One of the most sophisticated expressions of this principle is found in the ancient Indian architectural texts known as the Vastu Shastras. These guides didn't just detail how to build a single structure, they provided intricate instructions for laying out an entire city, a Nagara, based on the sacred diagram of the Vastu Purusha mandala. This mandala was more than a map. It was a symbolic representation of the cosmic being from whose body the universe was formed. To design a city upon this grid was to build upon the very body of the divine, organizing the urban space as a microcosm of a perfect, ordered universe. The city was planned as a precise square or rectangle, oriented to the cardinal directions, with its main gates aligned to the 4 points of the compass. At the very heart of this geometric plan lay the Brahmastan, the central zone, which was always left open as a public square or reserved for the most important temple. This was the city's spiritual and energetic heart, its direct connection to the axis of the world. The king's palace, the main temples, and the markets were all assigned specific zones within the grid based on their spiritual and social function, creating an urban landscape that was not only highly organized but also believed to be in a constant state of harmonious balance with the cosmic forces. To live in such a city was to live inside a living, breathing mandala, where every street and every neighborhood played a role in a vast, sacred geometry. A parallel yet distinct tradition flourished in China with the ancient practice of feng shui, which means wind and water. This was not mere interior decoration. It was a complex system of geomancy, a method of aligning cities, buildings, and tombs with the invisible energy flows of the earth, known as Kai. The goal was to position human construction to harness positive energy and deflect negative influences, ensuring health, fortune, and harmony. The design of Beijing, particularly during the Ming Dynasty, is a masterwork of feng shui principles. The entire city was laid out on a strict north-south axis, with the Forbidden City, the home of the Son of Heaven, the Emperor, at its precise center. This alignment connected the imperial palace directly to the celestial North Pole, the unmoving center of the heavens around which the stars revolved, symbolizing the emperor's role as the central pivot of all under heaven. Mountains to the north provided a protective barrier against malevolent winds, while artificial lakes were dug to the south to gather and hold auspicious Kai. Every gate, every courtyard, and the placement of every significant building was calculated to maintain this delicate energetic balance, turning the capital into a powerful engine for imperial stability and prosperity. The city itself was a talisman, a colossal charm designed to channel the benevolent forces of the universe directly into the heart of the empire. This profound influence of mythic blueprints on city planning is not confined to the ancient world. It echoes powerfully in the design of modern capitals, most notably Washington, D.C. Pierre-Charles L'Enfant's 1791 plan for the city is a fascinating blend of Enlightenment rationality and Masonic symbolism. The Freemasons, who counted many founding fathers among their members, saw themselves as the heirs to the tradition of the mythic architect, inheritors of ancient geometric secrets. The layout of Washington, D.C. is filled with geometric symbolism that would have been immediately recognizable to them. The most striking feature is the massive triangle formed by connecting the White House, the Capitol building, and the Jefferson Memorial. This is not an accident. To the Masons, the triangle and the compass were powerful symbols of enlightenment, divine proportion, and the pursuit of knowledge. The long, wide diagonal avenues that slash across the grid of smaller streets create numerous other geometric patterns and sightlines, ensuring that the seats of political power are visually and symbolically interconnected. The city's very design was intended to be a physical manifestation of the new nation's ideals: order, reason, and a government built upon what they believed were timeless, universal principles of harmony and balance, principles they traced back through Masonic lore to the mythic architects of antiquity. This journey from the mandala-planned cities of India to the symbolic avenues of Washington reveals a breathtaking continuity in human aspiration. It shows that the impulse to shape our environment according to a sacred plan is a universal and enduring one. We have always sensed that the way we arrange our world matters on a level that goes far beyond simple practicality or aesthetics. By organizing our cities on cosmic principles, we attempt to bring the overwhelming, often frightening, vastness of the universe down to a human scale, creating an ordered haven from the chaos of nature and the unpredictability of life. We build not just for shelter but for meaning, crafting our collective homes as permanent prayers in stone and street, hoping that by mirroring the divine order above, we might finally achieve a lasting peace and prosperity here below. And now we arrive at the latest and perhaps most revolutionary iteration of this ancient impulse, the digital frontier. The mythic architect has traded the hammer and chisel for a mouse and a keyboard, and the new sacred spaces are being built not from stone but from code and pixels. This is not a departure from our deepest traditions, it is their logical evolution. The same human urge that once drove us to align pyramids with stars now compels us to construct entire virtual worlds, proving that our desire to create ordered, transcendent spaces is not bound by physical limits, but is a fundamental part of our consciousness, endlessly adaptable to new tools and new realms. Consider the breathtaking phenomenon of massive online games like Minecraft. On the surface, it's a simple game of placing blocks, but in the hands of a dedicated community, it transforms into the most expansive architectural playground in human history. Teams of digital builders spend months, even years, collaborating to recreate entire mythic landscapes. They build sprawling replicas of Minas Tirith from Lord of the Rings, complete with its 7 concentric walls and towering citadel. They painstakingly assemble digital versions of the great Gothic cathedrals, with flying buttresses and stained glass windows rendered in glowing cubes. These are not just models, they are explorable, immersive experiences. A player can literally walk the streets of these fantastical cities, their avatar dwarfed by the scale, experiencing the same awe that a medieval pilgrim might have felt entering Chartres for the first time. The digital architects behind these projects are the direct descendants of the master builders who worked from the blueprints of Vishvakarma or the principles of Vastu Shastra. They are operating with a new kind of sacred geometry, the precise placement of voxels, to inspire wonder and create a sense of place that feels both epic and meaningful. This potential for awe expands exponentially with the advent of virtual and augmented reality. VR headsets transport us inside the architecture, dissolving the barrier between the viewer and the creation. Imagine not just looking at a model of the Hindu cosmos, but putting on a headset and standing at the very center of it. You could look up and see the digital heavens stretching infinitely above you, look down to see the underworlds below, and turn to see the symbolic mountain ranges encircling you. This is mythic architecture experienced not as a symbol but as a reality. Augmented reality, meanwhile, allows us to overlay these divine blueprints onto our physical world. You could point your phone at a city park and see a shimmering, digital ziggurat superimposed upon the grass, or watch as a Celtic stone circle materializes in your local town square. These technologies don't replace our physical world, they sanctify it, layering it with myth and meaning, turning every environment into a potential portal to the sacred, just as ancient cultures saw their entire landscape as alive with divine presence. This radical shift to digital creation raises profound new questions about the nature and future of these spaces. In the physical world, a temple or a pyramid endures for millennia, its meaning solidifying over centuries. But a virtual world is inherently fragile. It exists only as long as the servers are running and the code remains compatible. A digital cathedral built today could vanish tomorrow with a corporate decision or a technological shift. This impermanence challenges our very definition of a monument. Is a building no less sacred if it is made of ones and zeros instead of granite? Furthermore, these spaces are often created not for a god, but for a community of players. The divine presence is not a deity, but the collective experience of the people who inhabit and give life to the world. The transcendence comes from shared exploration and collective storytelling within the authored space. The mythic architect becomes a game designer, a world builder who creates the conditions for awe and community, crafting the rules and the landscape that allow for sacred experiences to emerge organically. Yet, this digital realm also opens up possibilities that would have been pure magic to our ancestors. We are now entering the age of generative design and artificial intelligence, where we can collaborate with the algorithm itself. Imagine describing a concept to an AI, a temple dedicated to a goddess of light, built from crystalline sound, floating among the clouds, and watching as it generates a fully realized, explorable 3D model based on that poetic prompt. The AI becomes a kind of digital demiurge, a partner in creation that can instantly translate our most abstract mythological concepts into navigable spaces. This doesn't remove the human architect, it elevates them to a director of divine potential, a high priest of imagination who guides the AI to manifest visions that were previously trapped inside the human mind. We are building the tools to externalize our collective unconscious, to give form to the archetypal landscapes that have lived in our myths and dreams since the beginning of time. Ultimately, this journey into the virtual proves that the core of mythic architecture was never about the stone, the marble, or the gold. It was always about the human mind. It was about our innate need to create structures that reflect our highest ideals, our deepest fears, and our most profound questions about existence. The materials are incidental. Whether we are arranging megaliths under the open sky or coding a universe inside a computer, we are engaged in the same sacred act. We are building external representations of our internal worlds, crafting ordered spaces in a chaotic universe to remind ourselves that we are capable of creating meaning, beauty, and transcendence. The future of mythic architecture is boundless, limited only by the scope of our imagination, as we continue our eternal work, not just on the earth, but in the infinite expanses of the digital cosmos we are now learning to call home. And so we arrive at the end of our journey, having traced the path of the mythic architect from the celestial forges of the gods to the glowing screens of the digital age. This enduring idea, this persistent vision of a master builder behind the visible world, is far more than a curious relic of ancient belief. It is one of the most powerful and shaping forces in human history, a deep current that has flowed through our culture, our spirituality, and our creativity for thousands of years, giving form to our greatest wonders and giving voice to our most profound questions. These stories of divine engineering are not just about how structures were built. They are about why we build at all, revealing that the impulse to create is, at its heart, an attempt to connect, to understand, and to find our place within a vast and often mysterious cosmos. From the moment our ancestors first looked at the stable ground beneath their feet and imagined it had foundations, or gazed at the arching sky and described it as a dome, they were doing something extraordinary. They were using the most relatable process they knew, building, to make sense of a universe that was beautiful, powerful, and terrifying. The mythic architect gave a face and a purpose to that creative force. Whether it was Ptah conceiving the world through thought, Vishvakarma crafting the palaces of the gods, or a modern game designer coding a virtual cathedral, this archetype represents our fundamental need to see intention behind existence. It is the ultimate comfort, the idea that the chaos we sometimes perceive is merely a veil over a deeper, more beautiful order, a cosmic architecture designed with purpose and meaning. This belief empowered civilizations to undertake the impossible, to move mountains of stone and align them with the stars, not as slaves to a tyrant's ego, but as participants in a sacred project that connected their community to the eternal. The true legacy of these mythic blueprints is not locked in the past, it is alive and evolving all around us. It lives on every time an architect employs the golden ratio to create a building that feels inherently harmonious, or when a city planner lays out a new development with green spaces and walking paths, seeking to create a community that is in balance with nature rather than in conflict with it. It thrives in the digital realms we now inhabit, where the urge to create ordered, meaningful, and awe-inspiring spaces has simply found a new medium. The tools have changed from the hammer and the chisel to the mouse and the rendering engine, but the human desire behind them remains constant. We are still telling the same story, only now we are writing it in code and light. We are still seeking to build bridges not just between riverbanks, but between the human and the divine, the tangible and the imaginary, the individual and the cosmos. Ultimately, these explorations remind us that every great structure, whether made of granite or pixels, begins with a story. The pyramids are not just piles of limestone, they are the physical manifestation of a story about the pharaoh's journey to the stars. A Gothic cathedral is not just a feat of engineering, it is a prayer in stone, a story about reaching for heaven. The mythic architect is the original storyteller, and we have been collaborating on that grand narrative ever since. By studying these divine blueprints, we gain more than just historical insight. We gain a deeper understanding of our own creative spirit. We are all, in our own way, mythic architects. We build families, communities, careers, and art, all structures that we hope will provide shelter, meaning, and a legacy that outlasts us. We are all engaged in the sacred work of imposing order on chaos and crafting stories that give our lives purpose. So the next time you stand before an ancient monument, or even lose yourself in the beauty of a beautifully designed virtual world, remember that you are not just looking at a building or a simulation. You are reading a story, you are witnessing a prayer, you are seeing the enduring human desire to reach beyond the limits of our existence and touch something timeless. The mythic architect lives on in that desire, an eternal invitation to look at the world not just as it is, but as it could be, to build, to create, and to imagine. Thank you for exploring this magnificent story of imagination and engineering with us.